Today, we're back with the John Ankerberg Show with episode 2 of The Evidence from Astronomy That Points to an All-Powerful Creator, featuring Dr. Ross, PhD, Astronomy of Apologetics and such. I don't want to take a whole lot of preamble. If you're here, you already have some idea, hopefully, of what we're getting into, but in case you've skipped ahead in the line, Dr. Ross, PhD, astronomy, astrophysics, thinks he has good reason for God. We're going to get right into it and see what he has to say. But if you are new here, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It helps a small new channel like this tremendously. I greatly appreciate it. And I don't want to waste a bunch of your time. So without further ado, let's hit it. Okay, so we skipped over the title to save you some time. If, there's going to be edits, it's long videos, we do that. If you want to see the whole video, the link is in the description below. But to recap, for those of you just joining us for the first time, Dr. Ross does have an actual legitimate PhD in astrophysics. However, he does not work in astrophysics. He works as an evangelist. He is a professional apologist, and he does the whole thing. He's written the books. He goes and gives speeches. He collects the speaking fees to large congregations. He is a Canadian William Lane Craig. He just happens to have a legitimate PhD instead of a theological one. So bear that in mind.
Welcome to our program. I'm John Ankerberg, and I have a wonderful guest with me today. He is an astronomer and astrophysicist. His name is Dr. Hugh Ross. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and looked at the stars? You're seeing some of them around us right now. Do you think they're hot? Do you think they're cold? What do you think they are? Where do they come from? What are they made of? How many stars?
Where do they come from? Where do they go? Where do they come from, Stellar-eyed Joe? I don't know. This is first grade stuff. Not to disparage Canada, but if you're not teaching this in first grade, you're kind of behind the curve. I mean, the U.S. is not exactly leading the world in education, and this is first grade stuff. So, okay. In case you don't know or you forgot, because first grade was so long ago, stars form from gas clouds, mostly hydrogen, a little bit of other stuff, that collapse under the force of their own gravity into a center point, eventually reach a critical density where fusion ignites and the hydrogen starts burning into helium and emitting light. It is a nuclear furnace. As a consequence, very freaking hot. And they're made of hydrogen. Primarily, there's other stuff. A star like our sun can burn elements all the way up to iron, so there is other stuff in there, but it's mostly hydrogen. How many stars? That is a question that's open to some interpretation. Our best estimates put the number in the hundreds of billions of range, depending on which galaxy you're talking about. If you want to talk about all the stars in all the galaxies, first of all, we're grossly estimating the number of galaxies. We don't have an exact count yet. Every time we look further, we're finding more of them, so we just don't know. But our Milky Way has somewhere around 100 billion, 200 billion stars. We don't have a very clear view because we're inside the galaxy, so all the gas and dust and whatnot is in our way. It's just an estimate based on what we can see from other galaxies and what we can see around us.
Stars are up there. Does it matter? Does it matter to you? Would you be here if there wasn't a certain number of stars out there that you were looking at? These are the questions I'm going to ask Hugh. He's a genius in science, physics. I want to start when you were a kid and you were 7 years old and you're walking down the street with your mom and dad and you did look up at the starry skies. And as a 7-year-old kid, you said to your dad, are the stars, are they cold or hot?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Vancouver. It rains a lot in Vancouver. I remember one night when I was with my parents and suddenly the rain clouds broke and you could see the stars crystal clear. I was in awe looking at those stars, but I turned to my dad and said, are those stars hot? And he said, son, yes, they're very hot. I said, tell me why. And he said, you need to go to the library.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that sent him to the library. We established in the previous episode that this narrative is contrived. There's probably seeds of truth within it, but it was definitely constructed as a storyteller kind of narrative. It's been fictionalized to create a certain impression as part of the apologetics presentation.
Unfortunately, our grade 2 teacher took us on a field trip to the Vancouver Public Library, a library that had 3 million volumes. And so I got a card, and within the first year, I read all the books in the children's section on physics and astronomy.
You had books in your children's section that were actually on physics and astronomy? Wow, I am envious. My local public library growing up, it had a couple of basic astronomy books, like let's learn about the constellations, but nothing even close to physics. I had to go to the adult section to get my hands on the physics.
Gave me a pass to the adult section.
And then you went through that section.
I did. And then
Yeah, and then that wasn't good enough, so you got a card so you could go to the University of British Columbia to that library.
Right.
My question to you is that if those stars were not out there, would it matter to us as human beings? Would we even be here?
Well, it was Carl Sagan. I had him briefly.
Sagan, of course, is famous for saying we're made of star stuff. And I'm sure that's where I will bet you a nickel, that's where he's going with this. We have to have other stars exist for us to exist because, as I said at the beginning, suns like ours can only cook elements up to iron. In order to get heavier stuff than iron, and to get those heavy elements spread out into the cosmos so that planets like ours can form that have the heavy stuff from iron on up, including uranium, that takes supernovas, which means in order to get a planet like Earth, you have to have a star explode. A previous star had to exist and die, and then mix its gases around in order for our solar system to form, with the Earth being the way it is today. That said, do we need hundreds of billions of stars? No, not really. For these purposes, one star would do the trick. It'll produce more than enough matter for the Earth as we know. But we do have to have stars preceding our solar system forming to get the parts we need to make the us.
As a professor who said we're all made of stardust. The very first stars in the universe are composed of only hydrogen and helium. But in their nuclear furnaces, they make some of that hydrogen and helium into heavier elements. And then the larger stars blast the ashes into interstellar space, where a new generation of stars take those ashes, and because of that enrichment of elements heavier than hydrogen and helium, their nuclear furnaces produce much more elements heavier than hydrogen and helium.
That's not quite true. Our sun still can't go any heavier than iron. You can't do that in stellar nucleosynthesis. It takes a supernova to go higher than that. And we've known that since the 1950s-ish. That was a discovery that Fred Hoyle and crew made. That was their big contribution to science. They discovered how to extend nucleosynthesis beyond the limits of stellar nucleosynthesis, and it takes a supernova. So he should know this. If he's a PhD in astrophysics, he should know this. Even a blue supergiant, it doesn't matter that it burns hotter. There's limits. The stellar nucleosynthesis cannot go past iron. It has to supernova to make bigger stuff.
To be possible, you need 3 generations of stars. Our star, the sun, is a 3rd generation star, and only 3rd generation stars have an adequate quantity of heavy elements to make life possible.
I'm curious where he's going to go with this, because it seems to me, and maybe I'll learn something here, and that would be really cool, but it seems to me the star doesn't need to have heavy elements to make life possible. The star just needs the hydrogen so it can do the fusion thing and make the pretty light and energy and heat and so on. The planets need the heavy elements to make life possible. But let's see what he has to say. I'm excited now. I might learn something new.
But too many heavy elements is just as much of a problem as too few. So we have just the right number of stars in the universe for human life to be possible, and we're here at just the right time in the history of the universe for human life to be possible.
Yeah.
So we're just not going to explain that. We're not going to explain why a star would need heavy elements and that somehow affects its life-producing capabilities. We're just going to breeze right on past that. Okay, fine. Great. All right. It is true we're here at the right time in the universe for human life to be possible, which is why that's not a God thing. That's a physics thing. You would expect to find us existing in a time when it is possible for us to exist. Too much later, and by this I mean like 1 trillion years in the future, several times more than the current age of the universe, all the stars will have burned all their hydrogen and everything will suck. If we were here too much earlier, as in, 10 billion years sooner, possibly even sooner than that, there wouldn't be enough of the heavy elements to build humans with. So by the right time, we're referring to pretty much all of cosmic history. There's a period in the beginning when it wouldn't work, and there's a period in the far future where it wouldn't work. But the period we're in, which is almost all of it, is the right time.
Now, our program is all about the fact that science will bring them to belief in God. You were not a...
I'm still waiting for some we're on episode 2, and I'm waiting for something convincing based on science, not fallacy, not made up bullshit, actual science. Let's go.
Christian when you were a young man.
No.
In fact, almost all the way up to 17 years of age, wasn't it?
That's not correct. We found out in the previous episode that he got his hands on a Bible at age 11 and immediately started going to religious classes and learning everything he could about Christianity. He was a devout believer from Genesis 1:1. He said so himself, and that was at age 11. So this 17 years old thing, complete fabrication. It's part of the apologist narrative. Remember, he's not just a scientist, he's an apologist first and foremost. And his whole narrative is, I was an atheist. I looked at all the religions and I just didn't know. And then finally I came across Christianity, which just happens to be the default religion 90% of the people around me believe in, and we're handing out Bibles in my middle school. It was only then that I discovered for the first time Christianity, and I was convinced I was changed by the Lord. That was the whole story of the previous episode. But we know it's not 17. He said it's 11. That happened at 11.
Somewhere in that area?
Well, it was at 17 I realized there had to be a God, but I didn't discover who that God was until I was 19.
Even though he converted at 11. So, just to be clear here, this is why I said earlier, we know his story is a fabrication. It's a pleasant little dream, if you will.
What did you think? Because you're like...
By which I mean sales pitch.
A lot of people out there that believe there is a God. Einstein believed there was a God, but he didn't believe he was personal. What did you think about...
They mentioned this last time too. Einstein believed in Spinoza's God, which is to say the God of convenience, so that we don't have to waste a bunch of time thinking about it. Let's just say fine, God, whatever, and move on.
God.
I was raised in a home where they taught the morality of the Christian faith.
The morality of the Christian faith. That's interesting. He made a big deal out of morality last time, and I'm still wondering what exactly that's supposed to mean.
Has to be a cosmic beginner. And I wondered what or who that cosmic beginner was. This has to be the agent of a personal being because of the amount of investment and care and design he put into the universe throughout its entire history to make our existence possible.
And now we're running afoul of the arrogance again. We're restating a lot of what came up in the last episode. He believes the entire universe exists and existed for billions of years up till now, just so humans could emerge on this one planet. All of this is just for us. And yet, we're still plagued with cancer and disease and earthquakes and suffering and poverty and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty bad design, Dr. Ross, I have to say.
Well, if the universe is really designed to make possible a home for humanity, And given the vastness of the universe, its age, its extent, all of its components, that's a lot of investment to make a home for humanity.
Which is an excellent reason to not suppose that.
And so that told me that whatever is responsible for the universe must have a very high value and probably some specific purposes for us human beings. Maybe the cosmic creator indeed has a purpose and a destiny for we human beings.
Do you have any evidence for that, though? Specifically, any evidence from astronomy? Because that is literally the topic of this show. The evidence from astronomy that points to an all-powerful creator.
Yeah, and you also say that unfortunately many researchers refuse to acknowledge the very evidence that they're looking at, and they put on a pair of glasses that says, I don't care what I see, that God is not necessary to explain anything. Conclusion is part.
That's entirely backwards. You don't start with your conclusion. You look at the evidence, and then if the evidence says a God is necessary, you might consider a God. But if the evidence doesn't need a God, why would you put one in there to try to explain it?
Part of those glasses.
It is, and we all have our biases, so you always need to say, what kind of glasses am I wearing? And I think it's good, too, in terms of dialogue, to always reveal to people where you're coming from, what your biases are, what your worldviews are.
Okay, so he's advocating honesty and biases, not questioning your biases, not trying to determine what's actually true, but at least being honest about the fact you have a bias.
I began believing, okay, there is no God. Then I discovered there is a God. Didn't think this God was personal, but I kept testing my presuppositions and beliefs. And so I would share with other people, hey, I appreciate where you're coming from. What have you done to put those beliefs to any kind of rigorous objective test?
How do you prove there's a God? How do you show there's a God? I mean, if you wanted to demonstrate your God, the first step is to demonstrate there's something supernatural, and then build out from there. Show how that's not just me being a magician, there's actually a God behind it. And here's how we show who the God is, and here's how we show what the God wants, and, reaffirm his holy book. Demonstrate it. Show that it's real. That's all we need. Just show it's real.
Now, let's go back to the question that you asked your mom and dad, and that is, are stars hot? What did you find out?
Well, I went to the library. I came home with 5 books on physics and astronomy when I was 7, and those books explained to me why the stars are hot. There's nuclear furnaces inside the stars. One of the books I had was on nuclear physics, so I read that. And so then I had an answer, and I shared it with my parents. My parents really didn't seem to care. They were just impressed that I was satisfied. The stars are neither too few nor too many. They're just the right number.
We've got all of these stars out there. Do humans need them to exist on Earth or to exist any place?
Well, we do need them because they make all the elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. And we live on a planet that has a panel.
But do we need them now? We needed them to make the other elements for us in the past, but now that Earth exists, and as you say, the whole purpose of the universe is so life on Earth could exist, specifically humans, why do there need to be other stars? Why are there stars in other galaxies if Earth was the whole point? Why bother with stars anywhere else?
Panoply of 92 elements. And one thing that amazed me growing up, the quantity of each of those elements in the crust of the Earth is exactly what we need for human civilization to be possible.
Again, he's pretending a specificity that doesn't exist. There's a huge range. We have way more carbon than we actually need. We do need a ridiculous amount of carbon, but there's way more carbon than we actually need. So the range of possibilities to make human life work are gigantic. It's not like we have to have it right down to the specific element in order for life. If we had one fewer nitrogen, there wouldn't be life on Earth. No, not even at all.
We don't have too much uranium. We don't have too little uranium. We got just...
Do we actually need uranium, though? Like, we use it in our nuclear reactors. We have used it in our nuclear weapons. Do we have to have those to make human life possible? I'm pretty sure human life would have arisen just fine if there were no uranium on Earth at all.
It's the right amount, and that works for all the elements we see in the periodic table. That communicated to me, somebody must have fixed the numbers. Why is everything exactly just right?
See, he's doing that misleading thing. Oh, it's exactly just right. The numbers have to be fixed. No, not even a little bit. It's so grossly misleading that it's making it hard for me to articulate how severely misleading it is. Aluminum. Humans would definitely have arisen if we had half the aluminum, or twice the aluminum. Like, entire orders of magnitude difference would make no difference. We would still be here.
I guess, why is the sun, right where it's at, so important to human life on Earth?
So I'm thinking they're going to go with another fine-tuning argument. The Earth is just the right distance. I've said before, every video is somebody's first video, so I'll say it again here. The habitable zone thing is a myth. The Earth happens to be just the right distance from the sun. If we were just a little closer, we'd burn. If we were a little farther, we'd freeze. No. We could be millions of kilometers closer and still be in the habitable range. Or millions of kilometers farther and still be in the habitable range. And the habitable range itself is a myth. You don't need to be a certain distance from a star. You need to be a certain distance from a star, like our star, on an Earth-like Earth with an Earth-like atmosphere. Because what you need is liquid water to get Earth-like life. And liquid water depends on two factors, temperature and pressure. So you could be considerably further back, and with different temperature, or a different atmospheric pressure, you could have liquid water at a completely different temperature scale. Likewise, we could be much closer in, and with a much thicker atmosphere to hold the water down, to raise that boiling point, we would have liquid water under those circumstances. It's only for Earth specifically to be Earth-like does it need to be here, where it is, under the conditions it's under, many of which are produced by the organic action of life on Earth itself. The composition of the atmosphere is the result of organic action, so the atmospheric pressure is at least partly the result of biological processes. So we as living things, adapted the planet to suit us, which is a strong indicator it was not placed here specifically by a creator.
It's exactly the right mass to have maximum stability.
That's completely misleading as well. Stars of any mass can be stable.
They have found many stars that are twins of one another, but they've yet to find a star that's a twin of the sun.
And that's false too. As I'm sure you are well aware, we have found thousands of exoplanets, many of which are candidate potential Earths, which means many of the stars are candidate potential suns.
Our star, in terms of its luminosity stability, is 5 times more stable than the star that places second to the sun.
I want a citation on that too, because that sounds unbelievable. Literally, I do not believe it. If that is true, that could be a candidate for supernatural interference. So I want that source. I want to know if that's true. I don't believe it is. It sounds completely freaking made up, and no source is provided. But if there is a legitimate source, I want to know.
And most of them are way less stable than the sun. And we need that stability for human global civilization to be possible.
Yeah, because the sun has not always been as stable as it is right now. And if it wasn't, it would be harmful to us. The way it is just now.
Again, by just now, we're referring to a period billions of years across. Remember, life has been on this planet almost since the very beginning. We're talking roughly at least 3 billion, probably 4 billion years. So, keep that in mind.
is very beneficial to us as human beings to live on this planet. But if we were here a couple billion years ago earlier, the fact is we'd be in big trouble. Why?
We'd be in big trouble because the early sun is particle radiation, X-ray, gamma radiation, flaring activity is about 100,000 times greater than it is today.
Citation needed. Also, we have a magnetic field. That kind of stuff does happen today, and we're largely protected, partly by our thick atmosphere, partly, well, relatively thick atmosphere. Compared to Mars, it's thick. Compared to Venus, it's nothing. But anyway, he's talking about the sun was like 100,000 times more active in the past, and I'm not aware of any evidence for that. I need to see a citation.
So great that no life would have been possible in the early Earth.
Weird how there was life on the early Earth more than 2 billion years ago. So, what do you make of that?
However, by the time the sun is about 700 million years old, that instability is subsided enough that bacterial life is possible. The moment the sun is stable enough for bacteria, we have bacteria. There's no time delay. And so as you look at the...
That's close to correct. As soon as the Earth reached a point, be it stellar stability or planetary stability, it's planetary stability. But as soon as the Earth reached a point life was possible, virtually immediately, life emerged. Now, by virtually immediately, remember, we're talking on huge time scales. This is a 500 million year long window, 500 million years. Somewhere in there, life emerged. But yeah, virtually immediately.
The history of life on planet Earth, it's in sync with the physics of the sun. But not until about 100,000 years ago did the sun become stable enough for the entry of human beings. And that...
What? Okay, first of all, we've got humans going back like 3 million years. And according to him, he read an evolutionary biology text when he was a child, so he should know this. But we needed our ancestors to be alive for us to be alive today. Like, if the world is not habitable for human beings, it's not habitable for pretty much all the primates. So there's a problem in that hypothesis, Dr. Ross.
And within 1.5 million years from now, 2 million years from now, the sun will be so bright. When that happens, photosynthesis ends. So in terms of human existence, the end is within 2 million years.
No. That's like saying life wasn't even possible 2 million years ago. Obviously it was. We know there were dinosaurs 65 million years ago. So no, that is completely not true.
I've thought of offering our audience and have chosen not to yet. One of them is on climate change. And it also has to do with a little bit of the moon. We're going to talk about the moon and the Earth.
We're just gish-galloping all over the darn place, ain't we?
Our Earth revolves around in a way that the temperature is just right for humanity. Now, maybe...
Yes, the temperature is just right. That's why we have winters that go to negative 40 degrees in some inhabited areas, and summers that reach 130 in other inhabited areas, somewhere between certain death and certain death. There is a little not death window.
A bunch of star, moon, planets, and ours is special. Why?
Ooh, I know. It's because our moon is ridiculously big. And that actually is something that's special about Earth. And maybe he'll mention it. Maybe that would be cool. That would be wonderful because our moon is amazing. Our moon is the largest freaking moon relative to the size of the planet that it's with anywhere. Our moon is stupid big.
Well, today, over 5,000 planets outside the solar system have been discovered. None of those planets are anything like any of the 8 planets in our solar system.
And that is completely untrue. Some of the first exoplanets discovered, because they're the easiest to find, are Jupiter-class planets, or even super Jupiters. Now, some of those Jupiters are much closer to their parent star, but they are Jupiter-type planets. Similarly, we found super Earths, we found regular Earths, the trap system. There are 4 Earth-like planets in that system at a habitable distance from that star. It's not quite the same as our solar system, but they're freaking Earth-like. Come on now.
And this led astronomers to the discovery, not only must Earth be fine-tuned design to make possible existence of humans.
Oh, yes, the puddle. Earth was fine-tuned for us. Billions of years later, Earth was fine-tuned for us. It couldn't possibly be that we adapted to the conditions that are here, and so we fit into the puddle rather than the puddle being made for us. The atmosphere of the Earth, as we see it today, the blue sky with the high oxygen content, that was the result of biological action. The Earth was not made that way. Our ancestors terraformed this planet as microbes to make it possible for us to exist. Now, there was no intention. They didn't have brains. They were just doing what they could do. They were exploiting the resources of their environment. But it set the stage for what followed, for more life forms to take advantage of that environment.
Our whole purpose for doing these programs is to show them this is the kind of evidence that brought you to belief in the God of the Bible.
To his credit, at least some of those things have something to do with astronomy, but I am still not impressed, guys.
Is because, first of all, the biblical statements, science for over 2,000 years to find out what in the world he was talking about in science that he had put in the Bible, and they found out it's exactly right. We're going to talk about this a little.
Really? The science is right in the Bible, but we've only just found it out now. How fascinating. If that's your basis for belief, if science that we only just now discovered in the Bible being right is truly the basis of your belief, if in Dr. Ross's case, it's the astronomical science that we've only just recently found out about is the basis for his belief, what's up with the 2,000 years of people who also believed that don't have access to those evidences because it's only recent discoveries? How did they justify their beliefs? It sounds to me like somebody's pulling our legs, folks.
The motive for God is that God so loved the world that he did something, that he gave his only special son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Because he couldn't have created a universe where people just didn't die. And he's all-powerful, so the only solution to the problem he created by fucking up his own laws was to sacrifice himself to himself and then take it back 3 days later. But only for the people who actually buy that story. It's almost, I don't know, to me, it's like a test. It's like the Bible was actually written by the devil in order to weed out who is foolish enough to fall for that.
Well, what impresses me is that the one that created the universe chose to sacrifice his life so that we could gain the moral perfection he possesses and we don't possess.
So we gained his moral perfection, so now we're morally perfect. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm morally perfect. This PhD astrophysicist guy who's actually an evangelist, he said so. All of you guys watching now, you're all morally perfect too. How does it feel to be morally perfect? Leave me a comment and let me know. Okay, that's it for this time. They are going into ad mode, where they do the, you can buy these episodes on DVD, you can buy other series, selling you all the stuff, the books and the merch and salvation. So yeah, we don't need to stick around for that. I don't know if we're going to do episode 3 when it comes out. I'm super not impressed, but hey, even if what they're saying is nonsense, it's let us talk about science, which is always cool. I'm always in favor, and I thank you very much for coming along for the ride. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And as always, remember, you don't have to mishmangle your gospeldy-gook with actual science, because you are better than religion.